Hey, what's up everyone? The PTS went live for the Division 2 today. It was the PTS for the Project Resolve Phase 1. We have been streaming it and we had a look at everything there was to offer. Today in this video, I'm just going to be recapping that really, going over all the stuff that we checked today in stream and showing you some of the patch notes as well. So we've got everything covered. It could be quite a long one, but if you want to know how exotic weapons are now going to work in the new update on the Division 2 in February, I've got that covered in today's video. We've also got all the weapon and gear adjustments as well. So stay tuned and watch this video to find out everything you need to know. I am going to leave a link to these patch notes down in the video description if you want to have a read through them yourselves. There's patch notes for the PvE changes and PvP. We will be using them as reference in this video. But as I said, if you want to read all through them, that's not what I'm doing today, so you can go and check them. Do take note, though, that these proposed changes are not final. This is a PTS. They will be taking feedback on board and maybe making adjustments as they go. So that's why we'll be also giving feedback in this video. I'm going to start with a few of the things that were most requested in stream, and we'll start with the open world loot boxes. So now with these loot boxes in the open world, you are going to get loot that is basically suited for whatever open world difficulty you are on. So if you're playing on challenging or heroic, you should get challenging or heroic loot. There was a little bit of a problem on the PTS. There was no way of changing the open world difficulty or putting those modifiers on, so I just assumed I was on heroic. I had no idea what I was on, but when I went round opening these, the loot was a lot better. If I open this one now, you'll see I'm getting a high-end piece and the stat rolls are quite high. I've opened loads of these in today's stream and they're all like this, bar one box that gave me an additional item that was purple, but they did seem much better. Next, we wanted to have a look at all of the exotic weapons and the fact that they could now have the third attribute changed on them. So, as you can see here with my Eagle Bearer, I took this to the crafting station and I got damage to target out of cover rolled onto it. So on any exotic weapon now, you're able to change this third attribute. So let's just show you how that works. If we come over to the crafting station, we'll do another weapon. I'll go to the weapons there, my exotics, and let's do the Lady Death. So I've got a Lady Death on me. And it's the same as any of the new exotics on the Division 2. It's exactly the same. You're just going to be reconfiguring it. We'll go into the Lady Death. I'll pick the one that I got, which comes with optimal range. And when I place my old one in there and I click on craft, it's going to give me a new Lady Death and it'll give me a random third attribute. It's giving me magazine size this time. What this means is you can keep on reconfiguring this until you get damage to target out of cover or any other attribute that you want on any weapon now, which is a brilliant change. The biggest question that I had though when doing this was, what happens to my expertise exotics when I reconfigure them? So we tested this out. Have a look at this Scorpio here. I have upped its expertise to 6. Now I imagine many of you have full 24 level exotics and you're not going to want to lose that expertise on them. And when you reconfigure them, you don't. We tested this out. Now, if you were to just dismantle that exotic, you'd lose it because it only works for that individual weapon. But when you do reconfigure exotics, it does carry over the expertise with them. So this is great information to share with you. I just want to say thank you to Sense in stream because I didn't think it was going to work like this, and he guaranteed to me that it did, and it does. So if we go over to that Scorpio reconfigure, we'll use that level 6 one now to craft another Scorpio, and you'll see that when we craft that, it's still going to be level 6 on the recrafted version. There you go. So it's still level 6 expertise, which means when this update does land in February, if you've got level 24 expertise exotics that you don't want to lose, when you do reconfigure them, it will carry over. Daily projects and weekly projects was another thing I was happy to hear was getting adjusted. What the patch note says about these is they basically want to readjust these to make them easier to do and more rewarding at the same time. So they haven't updated them all, but you can see here with this daily project for Foggy Bottom, I believe the XP is higher. There's a few more reward caches that you're going to get now for doing dailies. We can have a look at the weekly legendary project as well. I think you're only used to getting an exotic cache for that maybe, but there's more caches added there now, and I don't have it available on the PTS, but for things like the seasonal daily project, that gives you enough XP to go up a whole watch level, as well as other resources. There's also got to be an invasion project as well, according to the patch notes, to do with all the invaded missions to give you more reward. And basically, these projects are just going to be much more easier and fun to do and highly rewarding. One of the things that hasn't changed on the PTS here, it's showing you the extra reward there for the weekly PvP project. But the PvP requirements, where you got to win matches in conflict or kill certain agents, they're going to change to be a bit more casual, where you're only going to have to like play conflict and not win, and you're not going to be required to kill agents anymore. So it's going to make it more enticing for PvE players or more casual players to get these projects done too. Another new feature that's coming, I was excited to test out, was the instant medkit. So I'm just going to come to the firing range here to show how this works. When you take damage now, I'm going to take all my armor off for you. You are now able to use an instant medkit instead of holding to give you 25% armor. So you just double tap at the medkit button and you can see I've got 25% armor back there. That goes on to a 5-second cooldown. And if I want to, I can then use it again to give me 25% more. And keep on doing that until I go to full armor or I run out of medkits, because it does use them. One thing I got asked in chat and one thing we tested was, do specialization medkit buffs take effect on these? And I know if we go to Firewall and you unlock the medkit buff here, it gives you 200% armor and 200% health over 10 seconds. So we're just going to throw this on and show you what happens. So I have the specialization on now, and with the specialization alone, if I was just to use the instant medkit, nothing happens. So there's no buff there, there's no extra heal. So that suggests to me that anything on the specializations aren't going to take effect. But another question that someone did ask was, what about efficient on the chest piece? So I do have a chest piece with efficient on, and look what happens when we do this. So efficient, it should only basically give you this. Using an armor kit has a 50% chance to not consume the armor kit. And specialization armor kit bonuses are increased by 100%. So it shouldn't really do anything, right? The only thing it's going to do is maybe give me a chance of not consuming the med kit. So we're going to go and cause ourselves some damage again. And we did test this in stream. And yes, there is a chance that you don't consume it. But look at this. It goes up 50% when I use an instant kit. So I don't know why it's doing that, because the firewall specialization alone did nothing. But with efficient on as well, it's doubling the heal that I get. And I have the chance of it not being consumed as well. So with 2 insta heals, I am back up to full armor. This is the PTS. There could be some bugs around it. I can't really get my head around how this is working and how I got that increase. So obviously efficient is making a adjustment here, or the specialization, or both working together. I'm not so sure. What I think about this, though, in general, I think the insta-heal could be used very beneficially in PvP when needed, and even sometimes in PvE. It works across both. Chat was saying that they'd like to see something like a 40% rather than 25% increase, and also suggested maybe separate the instant medkits away from the normal medkits so you don't run out of them so quickly. Next, we're just going to have a look at the new rogue timer in non-invaded DZs and the gear combat lock. So when you're in the DZ now, when you go rogue, this is how long it's going to take you to go rogue in non-invaded. It'll still be the same in invaded dark zones. And they stated that they don't want rogues to be able to change their gear. So if I was to go into my inventory now, I'm not in combat or anything. If I go to loadouts and try and switch, it will stop me or say the loadout cannot be equipped while you're rogue. So it's kind of works there, but where I think it's also meant to work is when I switch items. I think I'm not meant to be able to switch these. So when you're in combat or out of combat, I shouldn't be able to switch these about, but I can in the DZ. So maybe that's something that they need to fix before it comes out, because I don't think that is intended. This change also carries over to PvE though, which wasn't stated until the patch notes. So let's just get into some combat here at the start of Grand Washington. I'm going to leave one enemy alive. So now we're in combat and there's an enemy alive. I'm not able to switch loadouts anyway. You never have been able to when you're in combat. But what you have been able to do is switch items like I just did in the DZ when I was rogue. You can't do that no more. If I try and switch the item, I can't do it. It is grayed out. There's nothing I can do. Let me just take care of these guys. So that was something that was a surprise and we wasn't expecting. So now when you are in combat, you are not going to be able to switch your weapons or gear pieces on the fly, that is now going to be locked out according to this first version of the PTS. The good news is, though, you can still swap your skills out. So if I want to take off this pulse for a decoy, that won't be a problem. I can switch that over. It's just going to be gear pieces and weapons that I'm not going to be able to swap while in combat. And I think that's how they wanted it to work when you're a rogue in the DZ. So a few changes are probably needed here, and there's a lot of feedback about this. People really didn't like that we couldn't change pieces on the fly when we were in combat in PvE. Expertise cost was another thing we tested out today, and just before we get into that, you'll notice this is now called the Tinkering Station. I'm not sure if that's going to stick, but the new tinkering menu is meant to be a thing in the new update, and it's not available in the PTS to test. I know it says it here, but if you go into tinkering, it's just the optimization. It's nothing new. I think they've just renamed it. And the tinkering menu as well is something that you're able to do away from the base of operations now, it says in the patch notes. So you could be in the middle of a mission, bring the tinkering menu up, and what it does is it puts recalibration and optimization in one. You're also able to send stuff to your expertise there, and even send stuff to your stash wherever you are in the world. None of that was available in the PTS to test today. So all we could really do here was have a look at expertise and the cost of that. So if we go into expertise, if you want to make things proficient, I noticed that there wasn't any cost adjustment. So sometimes you can donate donations here to make something proficient. They all look the same values. However, when you want to actually expertise an item that is proficient, these are much cheaper. So we'll work on this Scorpio here. I'll take it to level 2, and you can see in the bottom right hand screen how much this is costing as we go up. It's so much cheaper than it used to be. Now, I don't have maximum expertise level, so I can't go all the way, but it costs a lot less resources now to get your weapons leveled up once they are proficient. Exotic components don't kick in until a weapon is level 12, and at level 12 it just costs the one component to take it to level 13. And it's one more component then to take it to 14, and I can't do that because I don't have the expertise level. But now it would cost a total, I think, of 42 exotic components to get your weapon all the way to expertise 24, which is a lot less than it used to be, and the other resources have been reduced as well. Something else I wanted to test today as well was the skill mods. It wasn't available in the PTS now. So how skill mods are going to work in the future is that they're going to be unique. You'll collect them once and you won't need to like store them or manage them. If you were to collect the same skill mod again, it'll just go based off how big the attribute roll is. So if it's higher than the last one you got, it would save to the one that you got, and you just keep on going until you got the max value, and you'll only ever need one of them. We tried to test this out today, but again, it wasn't in the PTS. I was getting duplicate mods and all sorts. So something we'll look for in the future. Just a couple more things now before we go on all the weapon and gear adjustments, which I know people are looking forward to see. I wanted to see what descent changes there were, because they said in descent, how descent is going to work now is it's going to be quicker to get to the nemesis. So we tested this out. And it was. I was able to get to the nemesis just after 4 loops, which made it quicker and easier to get that done. And on top of that, they said with the talents in Descent, how they're going to work now is that they're going to be rotating. Not all talents are going to be available every single week you play Descent. They'll rotate every week, giving you more chance to get some talents that you want. Now, my only feedback on this is that you have no idea what talents are in that rotation, so it'd be good to know. Now I checked everywhere, I couldn't find it, but it'd be good to know what talents were available every given week, so I could I could at least plan what I wanted. Like, for example, when I play Descent, I always look for Unhinged. I'll sometimes wait for Unhinged. I'll keep on re-rolling for Unhinged. But if Unhinged isn't available that week, that's going to be a waste of time. And how do I know it's not available? So that's something I think they just need to think about, because although I do like the idea of the rotating talents, I don't like not knowing what talents are available and are not. But something that is really cool about Descent now with the currency that you earn from Descent, when you come to the NSA station once you're outside of Descent, and you've got all these perks that you can buy that work inside the mode. Once those are all done and you keep on earning currency, you can now use that for exotic caches and named item caches. They said the value of these were just a placeholder, so they may change. But I think this is very good, so at least you're going to still get reward from those credits that you earn or the currency that you earn as you keep on playing Descent after everything else is done. The last two things that I wanted to test really were the status effect changes and conflict. We tried our best to get into a game of conflict. The closest we got was 7 out of 8 agents while we were streaming. I've just tried matchmaking again now to hopefully get a game to show you some footage, but I'm stuck on 4 out of 8 and it's not going up. There's just not enough people matchmaking on my server right now to get a decent game. But I do really like the sound of the conflict changes on the patch notes. So I do just want to go over them. They said our objective is to differentiate conflict from other PvP experiences by placing a stronger emphasis on shooting and item selection rather than relying heavily on shade level bonuses. So shade and expertise normalization is going to be a thing where, you know, they're going to be removed. Basically, they're not going to matter. With spawn areas, turrets were added to all spawn points to prevent spawn camping. That's something that I wanted to test out. And loadout switching and individual pieces of gear will be allowed only once per spawn before exiting the spawn area. Once out of the spawn area, the player is no longer allowed to swap. So whether that worked or not, because in the DZ I was still able to switch individual items, but that's their intention. There's also going to be a rewards buff for conflict. There's an extended loot pool. Dropped items are now of legendary difficulty quality or equivalent, so I think that's brilliant. And caches now give 2 items with a possibility for an additional third one. And with the XP gain, it's going to be significantly boosted to align with other game modes. I was able to test the status effects out though in PvP by going into the DZ with Penny. So what we did a bit of testing. Penny put a status effect build on and I initially had an all red DPS. So she's just put the flame turret down now. That's going to set me on fire. And I've got a chem launcher on because the chem launcher is going to reduce that status effect. And as you can see, when I put that chem down, it really does slow the amount of armor that was taken off of me. Tried other things as well. Penny would switch skills and try stickies and things like that. I think she's about to fire a flame sticky at me or a chem. I'm just going to set that off there. And again, you can see the diminishing return there. It didn't take much armor off at all. I didn't even use a chem that time. I'm pretty sure that before this update, that would have killed me. The only reason I was like testing out the DPS build was because on the Division 1, I always remember running around with a first aid and it was a great counter for a lot of stuff that could have been thrown at you in terms of like pred bleed and stuff like that. So I just wanted to see if it had a similar effect. Now it doesn't have the exact effect like it did in Division 1, but it can still be a counter for a DPS build. But I think these changes really take effect when you throw a healer build on in your squad in PvP, because look at this now. So I've just thrown a healer build on. Penny's going to throw everything that she's got at me and I'm going to heal myself. And you'll notice that with all the status effects, she can't do nothing. So that's just a sticky that she's thrown at me. That's exploded. It did take off quite a bit of armor there, but that was it. And the heals healed me right away. The status effect after that and the burn wasn't really doing much. She then put the flame turret down. And now this has got diminishing effect now because the sticky burn to begin with was 1 damage over time status she had tried to put on me, and this flame turret is a different damage over time status effect, and I was hardly doing anything again. And there's another sticky. You can see it did even less damage at that time when it went off. So this is kind of how it works now. In PvP with status effects, there's 2 different types. There's damage over time and there's crowd control. And the more you use one of those types, it's going to be diminishing returns. And there's just plenty of counters to them. The healing's going to give you extra hazard protection. If you're on fire, you're able to barrel roll to get extra hazard protection. And the more statuses that come at you, the more immunity you get until you're fully immune. It was very hard to kind of just test this like we did in stream. However, we could see the effects on it. And I cannot wait to try this out in full motion when these go live and actually get in the DZ and see how it plays out when you're playing it proper in your teams. And finally, we're now going to end on all of the gear and weapon balancing. Starting with the gear, there's a lot of changes coming to brand sets. I'm going to go over all the changes now. Only the things that are changing now. 511 Tactical. The third piece is going from 10-piece hazard protection to 20% hazard protection. Badger Tough. Third piece goes from 10% armor on kill to 15% armor on kill. Bellstone Armory. Third piece goes 20% incoming repairs to 40% incoming repairs. Brazos goes from 20% mag size for 3 pieces to 30% mag size. Gilligard goes from 1% armor regen to 3% armor regen on the third piece, but also on this for having 2 pieces, it goes 10% health to 20% health. Golan Gear for 3 pieces is 5% total armor being increased to 10%, and 2 pieces 1% armor regen to 2% armor regen. Habsburg, the third piece has 10% status effects increased to 20% status effects. Lengmo, 2 piece has 10% skill health increased to 25% skill health, and 15% LMG damage for 3 pieces increased to 20%. Uzina Getica has a change to the third piece talent of 10% hazard protection to 20% hazard protection. Alp Summit is next, and with this you have a 2 and 3 piece change. The 2 piece goes from 20% skill duration to 30%, and the third piece goes from 10% skill haste, and that changes altogether to 30% status effects. China Light has a 2 piece change with 10% skill haste going to 20%, and the 3 piece change of 10% status effects to 20% status effects. Electrique with the third piece set goes from 10% skill damage to 20% skill damage. Empress International just has a 2 piece change where 10% skill damage changes to 20% skill damage. Hana Yu has a 2 piece change of 10% skill damage to 20 and a 3 piece of 5% weapon damage to 10%. Murakami, 2 piece change from 20% repair skills to 30% repair skills, and a 3 piece change is 10% skill damage to 30% skill damage. Richter and Kaiser, the 2 piece change is 10% explosive resistance up to 25%, and the 3 piece is 20% repair skills to 40% repair skills. And with Wyvernware, the 2 piece change is 10% status effects to 15, and the 3 piece is 20% skill duration to 40% skill duration. And this is the final slide now. Cheska has a 3 piece change of 10% health to 30% health. Douglas and Hardin, 20% weapon accuracy to 30% weapon accuracy for the third piece. Fenris, that goes 20% weapon stability to 30% weapon stability for the 3 piece. Grupo has a 2 piece change, 15% explosive damage to 20. Petrov has a 3 piece change of 20% ammo capacity to 30. Overlord, the 10% weapon handling changes to 15% weapon handling on the 3 piece. And for Walker, the 5% damage to health changes to 10% damage to health for the 3 piece. There are a ton of weapons balancing changes as well. So we already know all exotic weapons, the third attribute will be reconfigurable. But if we have a look at the assault rifles, the ACR set, that's going to have a 10% weapon damage increase. The CTAR and Rail Splitter has a plus 10 mag size. The F2000 weapon with all its variants has a plus 50 RPM and plus 10 mag size. All the different foul weapons will have 5% weapon damage. The military G36 and all the variants will have 50 RPM increase. Honey Badger and the Savage Wolverine are plus 5 mag size. The MK16 variants will increase 10% in weapon damage. The military P416 and its variants, including the Eagle Bearer, will have an increase of 50 RPM. Then on to submachine guns. The AUG and all its variants will have 25 increase in RPM and 10% weapon damage. The Banshee and the Grudge will have 50 RPM increase with 5% weapon damage. The MP5 and its variants will have a plus 6 mag size. The MP7 and Swap Chain will have 50 RPM increase and 5% weapon damage. The Police T821 and all its variances will have 10% weapon damage increased. The converted SMG9 and its variants will have a plus 50 RPM. The M1928, Tommy Gun, the Slayer, and the Grown Great will increase in weapon damage by 10%. And the Police UMP45 and its variants will have 10% weapon damage increase. With light machine guns, every LMG is going to have its weapon damage increased by 20%, just not the Iron Lung, that's going to be 10%. And then onto rifles, the ACRSS will have an increase of 10% weapon damage, the Ruthless and Merciless 10% weapon damage, the USC 45 and its variants 10% weapon damage, UIC 15 Mod 2 will have 30% weapon damage. This is a dreadful rifle. Maybe that'll make it usable. The M16A2 and its replica will have 30% weapon damage as well. The MDR battle rifle and the MDR battle rifle replica will have 20 RPM increase and 10% weapon damage. Resolute MK47 and the Harmony 20% weapon damage. Military MK17 and its variants 25% weapon damage. And the SIG 716 and its variants 25% weapon damage. Marksman rifles look like this. The M700 Carbon and its other variants will have 8 optimal range increase and 25% weapon damage. The Covert SRS and its variants will have 30% weapon damage. The SR1 and its variants will have 30% weapon damage. And the Paratrooper, the Surplus SVD, Commando, Dread Edict will have 15% weapon damage. The Tactical 308 and Scalpel getting +8 on optimal range and 20 RPM. Other weapons include the Carbine 7 and the Stoner LMG. When you get these items, they normally come with a guaranteed talent on them. That's no longer going to be the case, and they will now drop with a random present talent. Talking about weapon talents, here are all the weapon talent adjustments. The Dr. Home is going to change proc condition to target headshot instead of target killed. The Actum Astorium will go 50% of the next magazine filled with shock ammo instead of 100% for PvP only. Future Perfection, weapon kills grant 1+ skill tier for 15 seconds, stacks up to 4 times. Weapon kills a skill tier 6 grant overcharge for 15 seconds, and the overcharge cooldown is 90 seconds. Before this, weapon kills granted 1+ skill tier for 19 seconds, and it's stacked up to 3 times, so that was the change there. Swift for the Stinger, performing a cover to cover grants 20% weapon damage for 20 seconds. Before, that was for 15 seconds. The Thunderstrike deals 20% weapon damage to shocked enemies. After 4 kills, it applies shock to the next enemy that you hit. Before, it dealt 30% extra weapon damage. Perfect Thunderstrike deals 25% weapon damage to shocked enemies, and after 3 kills, applies shock to the next enemy you hit, and before that was 40%. The Big Game Hunter, headshots grant 4% headshot damage, and that will stack up to 25 times. Before that was 2% headshot damage, and it stacked up to 50 times. Breathe Free, which is the Lady Death talent. When moving, you gain 4 stacks per second or 8 stacks while sprinting, and the max stack is now going to be equal to the weapon's mag size. Before, this was the same, but it totaled up to 32 stacks. With the Flatline talent, this is now going to deal 15% weapon damage to pulsed enemies. After 4 kills, it will apply pulse to the next enemy that you hit. Before, this was 15% to pulse enemies, and it's after 3 kills that you did that. Perfect Flatline will deal 20% weapon damage to pulse enemies, and after 3 kills, it will apply pulse to the next enemy that you hit. Again, before, it was just the 2 kills. And then Perfect Preservation, killing an enemy repairs 15% armor over 5 seconds. Headshot kills improve the repair by an additional 15%. Before, this was 12% over 5 seconds, and the additional was 12%. We've also got a change to gear talents. Intimidate, you're going to gain 3 stacks per second up to a max of 9, and each stack increases total weapon damage by 4% to enemies within 10 meters. Before, that was 1 stack per second to a max of 7. Perfect Intimidate, you're going to gain 3 stacks per second up to a max of 10, and each stack increases total weapon damage by 4% to enemies within 10 meters. Before, that was 1 stack to a maximum of 8. Makeshift Repairs, which is the Foundry Bulwark gear set. Whenever you or your shield take damage, 25% out of the amount is repaired to both over 10 seconds. Before, that was 20% and 15 seconds. The Process Refinery talent on the Foundry Bulwark increases makeshift repairs from 25% over 10 seconds to 35% over 10 seconds. That used to be 20 to 30. Improved Materials for the Foundry Bulwark decreases time taken for makeshift repairs from 10 seconds to 5 seconds. That used to be 15 seconds to 10 seconds. The Obliterate talent is changing. Critical hits increase total weapon damage by 1% for 10 seconds. Before, that was 5 seconds. I really like that change. And with Unbreakable, you're going to get 40% armor repaired when you proc Unbreakable in PvP only. That used to be 50%. Perfect Unbreakable is going to 50%, and that used to be 55%. Again, only PvP only. The only other note they have there is the technician's linked laser pointer pulse duration was reduced from 20 to 6 seconds. And there we go. That is everything that we tested and went over in today's Project Resolve PTS stream, all in a video for you. Let me know what you think down in the video comments about these changes, any feedback that you have, just in case the dev does have a read. They'll be able to read through your comments, but I'd want to read myself. I want to know what you think. What do you think of all these changes? Now, they're going to take all feedback into account, and in January, Phase 2 will go live. They'll make some changes for Phase 2, and we'll test them again. And better yet, in Phase 2, we're going to be getting all of the gear and exotic and items that are going to be coming in Season 3 of Year 5 of the Division 2. So I look forward to testing them all out as well in January. I can't wait. Well, thanks for watching this today. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe if you're new here, and until next time, stay safe and peace out.